Republican Senators Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton are making the argument that Donald Trump should not be held accountable for his actions in a court of law. Instead, Donald Trump's future should be decided by the will of the voters. The thing is, though, we already tried that. And the last time Trump and his allies were given the chance to obey the will of the voters in 2020, they decided they did not like what the voters had to say. They did not like the will of the voters. And so then they tried to overthrow the results of the election. And that is the essence of at least two of these indictments here. And so perhaps as a backstop to that strategy, there is another contingent of Republicans in Congress just trying to shut the whole thing down. CBS News reported this week that there are not one, not two, but three Republican-backed proposals in Congress to defund Jack Smith's investigation as a way to stop his charges from ever reaching a courtroom. Joining me now is former United States Senator Claire McCaskill. Claire, thank you for being here. We put that Josh Hawley sound in there just for you, but I would like you to respond to the notion that Donald Trump is being indicted because he's pushing back against a globalist cabal. Does that hold any water for you, Claire?
Well, it's stupid. And these guys are all lawyers, and three of them went to an Ivy League. I think three of them went to Harvard. Harvard has to be so embarrassed at this point. You know, this is Alice in Wonderland stuff, Alex. When the impeachment happened, after the president tried to mastermind a conspiracy to hold on to power, to foment a big lie about the election, to push for an insurrection, they all said, and Ted Cruz said it specifically, you know, we have courts for this. We should not convict him on the impeachment because we have courts, right? So now the rule of law is doing what it must in this country, and that is recognize the facts and apply the law. And what are these guys saying now? Oh, well, let's let the voters speak. They are hiding under their desks. It's a bunch of cowards making things up. And they're going to be in trouble in November because the vast majority of the country kind of sees what they're doing.
Yeah, you know, pointing out the fact that they all, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley, these are guys that have gone to top-tier law schools, who are highly educated in the law, and who for a time were seen as the leading lights of the next generation of Republican leaders. I find it staggering that this is the position that they're taking. And I think when you couple that with the polling that we have, a new poll, this is from Semaphore this morning, finds that Donald Trump's legal troubles could prove fatal in a general election. It finds that 24% of Republicans say the charges make them less likely to vote for Trump against Biden. Listen, polling is what it is, but that is the first indicator, I think, that we have that this is not nothing. This is not business as usual. And I wonder the degree to which you think, you know, there is any kind of internal recalibration inside the higher echelons of the Republican Party.
I think people are scared to death in the higher echelons of the party because here's the problem. They're in a boxed canyon, handcuffed to the base. More than 50% of the people who call themselves Republicans in America are for Donald Trump, in spite of almost 100 felony counts against him in both state and local jurisdictions, in state and federal jurisdictions. So they cannot go against this base. They're too afraid. They can if were real leaders. They won't go against this base. But the vast majority of independents, which is a growing sector of the electorate, the independents are up now, according to Gallup, close to 50%. The majority of the independents in this country don't want more Donald Trump, and certainly the Democrats don't. So they do not have a path to victory in the general election, and they kind of know it. And Trump has kind of rigged it, too. Speaking of rigging, he switched a bunch of states to winner take all. So these other Republican candidates, if they can't beat him outright in a bunch of states, he takes all the delegates from those states, which makes it very difficult for anybody who's polling at 10, 15, even 20% now to ever have a chance.
Yes. Ron DeSantis, we're talking to you. Claire, I do wonder, you know, of the things that the Republicans are doing to make the problem go away, other than saying, let this be decided at the ballot box, we chose to highlight this push in Congress to defund the special counsel's office, because as much as I would sort of wave that away as a harebrained, fringe right-wing idea, we're talking about a Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, who is, willing to abide almost any lunatic idea that his base floats out there, whether it's packing appropriations bills with political non-starters, what have you. I mean, do you think that the idea that special counsel Jack Smith should be, his efforts should be defunded could actually emerge as a line of argument with this modern Republican conference?
Not going to happen in the Senate. I can tell you that for sure. Keep in mind that there's a lot of senators that are from states where they have to win the independent voters to stay in office. They're not gerrymandered. You have states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Arizona and Nevada, Montana, where people want to get elected and they can't do it without independent voters. So they are never going to go for defunding Jack Smith at this point. That's never going to happen. All it's going to do is make the Republican Party look more isolated from most Americans right now.
I think the metaphor of a box canyon is so right, but weirdly, equally, they also have an off-ramp. I mean, it's a difficult off-ramp, but this is the point. If you want to quit Donald Trump, 91 felony counts is a great exit sign, and yet nobody seems to want to walk through that door. Claire McCaskill, always wise, the ever sage former senator from Missouri. Claire, it's great to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Alex.